Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Minerals to Metals online forum. Today's topic, the impact and challenges of mineral beneficiation policy interventions in the SADC region. Today we have with us Dr. Byelongo, Elisee, Isheloke, and Dr. Paul Jourdan. Dr. Isheloke is a business economist with interests in the mining economy, mineral beneficiation policies, and the green economy. And Paul is an African integrated development expert specializing in resource-based and development strategies. I would like to just run through some Zoom etiquette before inviting the first speaker. Please keep your mic muted and your video off. If you have any questions during the presentation, please leave them in the chat or raise your hand after the presentation if you'd like to come to the foreground. Please note that the forum is recorded and will be made available to the public. If you wish to remain anonymous, just you can change your name in Zoom and you can leave your questions in the chat. If there is anything else I can help you with, you can send me a message in the chat or you can send me an email to asia.latta@uct.ac.za. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Isheloke first, and I hope you enjoy.
Sorry, Aysha, I couldn't hear you.
Oh no, I introduced you. You are now. Are you okay to go first? Can you hear me now?
Yes. I'll go first. I don't mind. Yes. Should I start?
Yes, please. Thank you. So you can share your screen at the bottom.
Okay. Right now.
Would you like me to share the slides for you?
Can you just write something below? Can sorry.
No worries.
Okay. You can share on this. I'm trying to share this side. Maybe some technical problem here.
No worries. I can share it on this side and you can just let me know when I need to change slides.
Yes.
Okay.
No, but it's trying to. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm just opening up your PowerPoint and then I'll share them.
Just that my Zoom on this side disappeared, so I'm trying to go back to.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing the slide now.
Wait. can't see you on Zoom, yeah?
Elisee, can you see it?
I can't see anything here, but sorry about that. I really can't see Zoom at all.
Have
I
you
can hear
lost
you,
Zoom?
but I can hear you, but I can't see anything. But I'm trying to get that back to you.
At the
The
bottom
link.
of the page, maybe there's tabs that you could see. Otherwise, I can try and help you flying blind. I've got the slide open. I think everyone can see it. Maybe if you want,
But
you
can you see me?
Yes,
we can all see
we
you.
can see the screen.
Yeah, but on my side.
Do you want to leave
me
and
just
join
go back.
us?
I'm gonna go back to the. I'm gonna go back to the link and just.
Okay.
I think again.
we're gonna let Paul go first, and then I'm gonna help you on the side. Is that okay?
I should be.
Don't worry about it. We're gonna sort it out now. Paul, do you mind turning on your video and going first while we sort out the technical difficulties?
Let me just then. Can you unshare and I'll share, or will you share my presentation?
Either way.
Just looking for it. Let me go here. SADC RMV. Back to Zoom.
A little technical difficulties.
No, it's
sorry,
got to
guys.
be open for at the moment you're sharing Zoom. Share. There it is. Okay, got it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let me just check. It's 8 minutes past. I'll focus on beneficiation. The first point I want to make is what is beneficiation? Beneficiation is about bene, to add good, to add value. Therefore, it is obviously adding value to a commodity, going from iron ore to iron to steel to semis to fabricated items, etc., in a normal value chain or filiere or pipeline. But what is often lost is that the amount of value at each step, say from mineral processing to smelting to refining, is the net value addition in the country concerned. Meaning that if you are importing all of your inputs in, say, for instance, smelting, the amount of beneficiation is much lower than if you were using local inputs. Therefore, beneficiation is not only downstream but upstream. It's not only the forward linkages to go from iron ore to iron and steel, it's also the backward linkages. It's all of the inputs one uses in those activities, like for mining, all of the capital equipment, the machinery, the equipment, all of the consumables, the explosives, the reagents, the fuels, and then of course all of the services. Therefore, beneficiation is essentially both up and downstream value addition, because both are embodied in the final product in whatever state it is when it leaves the country. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second is, as per the SADC regional mining vision, now I'm not going to go through this thing in detail. It's about an hour of slides. you can go through in your own time, gives you the background, gives you then coming into the Africa mining vision and the critical linkages, and then the diagram that tries to capture both the AMV and the RMV with all of the 7 critical or most important linkages: the forward downstream, the backward linkages into capital goods, consumable services, the infrastructure linkages where resources can put in rail, they can put in ICT, can put in water, etc. The fiscal linkages, the one the World Bank likes so much, but is important, but is not the most important. And then the enablers, the knowledge linkages, which are critical for the backward and forward linkages. You won't get those two if you don't invest in the knowledge linkages, which is mainly human capital development and RDI, research, development and innovation. So this single slide tries to get all of that together. And that's the filia. We start with exploration, mine development, mining, mineral processing, smelting, refining, intermediates. And then finally, we go into the forward linkages.
Well, sorry to interrupt. Would you be able to make the slide full screens, because there's a lot of detail, and we've got a request that it make it a little bit bigger.
You make what? Sorry, I'm lost.
Okay, so if you go to slideshow at the top there.
Okay, at the top here.
Yes, there we go.
What? Stop share, pause share, new share.
No, just the slideshow. You can start the slideshow from beginning, or from current slide rather. Actually, there's just a little thing on the side there.
Is that it?
Sorry about that. There we go.
You want it like that? I don't know what you asking. Sorry.
Sorry, we want to just make the slide full screen. So there's a little play button over there from current screen. If you click it, it'll just start.
Yes, I've got the play button. I had it. I was playing it. I now unplayed it. There, it's playing. Is that not showing?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, well, it's playing on my screen, but not on yours.
And on my side, I can now see you as well.
Slideshow. Okay, slideshow from current slide.
Perfect.
Can you see it?
For some reason, it's not working on the side.
Do you want me to start, Aysha? Then
no.
We can sort out.
So let's keep it at Paul now. And sorry about interrupting you. Let's rather just carry on with the presentation as is.
Okay. I will reshare it very quickly to see if that's the problem. There, share. The problem seems to be when I animate it.
I see.
Can you see it?
I can see it. I don't think we can see the animations, and we still see the full window. Someone in the chat has suggested that you press F5.
Press what?
F5.
Pressed, it goes into the slideshow. That's what I had. Can you see it? And it's gone to the beginning. That's not very useful.
Oh no,
sorry
about that.
It went back to the beginning. One needs to show from the current slide. But
yeah, no, I know.
Hi,
there's just so many.
David Depel from Australia. This is working just fine now.
I don't know what you guys are seeing. Are you seeing this now?
Yes, seeing it full screen. It looks great.
Okay, now when I play, do you see?
I'm still seeing just your slideshow version, so that's fine.
You're not seeing the animated version?
No.
Okay, that could be that this is working in Linux. It's not on Windows. This whole thing is in Linux on the WPS Kingsoft. It's not using Windows.
Oh, fantastic.
That could be the problem, that Zoom is a Yankee outfit, most probably.
Hey, Linux is a US invention.
Okay, so we got there. The next point let's get back. It's now 15 past. Is the key feedstocks in the RMV. The RMVs, I think, should be essential reading. It's more detailed than the AMV and builds on the AMV, and it was done 10 years after the AMV. And several of the same people, including myself, worked on both the AMV and the RMV. What I'm coming to here is that beneficiation is confused often, especially by politicians who think because you have some exotic mineral, therefore you have an advantage in going to the next step. This is particularly true in Southern Africa with diamonds, with precious metals and minerals. Diamonds, platinoids, and gold, is that you can source these because they are so valuable, or their unit value. You'll source them in Mumbai pretty much the same price as you'll source them in Johannesburg or Gaborone. So just because you have something doesn't mean it's important for development. So the RMV, what it does, if you can see this slide, it says what are the key minerals that need to be beneficiated for use in our economy. Of course, ultimately diamonds are useful. It's totally, useless. What can you do with a diamond, right? But your main beneficiation that all industrializing countries did are the key mineral feedstocks into your economy. And there are not many of them. That is steel, which is 10 times more than all other metals combined, by far the most important. Polymers, which are also more than double all other metals combined. Then you've got coal, the energy minerals, which are the fossil fuels and the radioactive minerals. The infrastructure minerals, again, steel, cement, and base metals for electrification, copper, aluminium. And then very unsexy things like clays and aggregates. And then, of course, agriculture, simple NPK mainly, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphates. So those are every country should be working on those, because those are what create downstream jobs in manufacturing, agriculture, etc. In addition, there are some where we may have producer power, such as PGMs, cobalt, and diamonds, where that can be used to leverage beneficiation. Because of producer power, you can tell the buyers, right, if you want to be first in the queue to get these minerals, you must beneficiate in our country. And that's obviously why you get an Israeli diamantier in Gaborone. He's not there because he loves Botswana. He's there because he gets privileged access to diamonds. He would much rather be in Tel Aviv. The final other is, then what about all the other minerals, like tantalum and that we aren't going to use, and we export in raw? Well, there you can still try and add value, but don't bust your butt trying to do it if it doesn't make any economic sense. These are things like tantalum, niobium, tungsten, lithium, vanadium, etc. So if one then takes those and groups those downstream minerals, you see they're only really 6. It's not that complicated. They're the ferrous, which go into all sectors, into manufacturing, power, infrastructure, agriculture, the polymers, the base metals, fossil fuels, cement, and NPK. So if one looks at global consumption, you realize the most important raw materials in manufacturing are steel and polymers. So if you look at your motor car, what's it made of? Different steel alloys. and different plastics, polymers. And the same as your computer that we use in, or the screen, most things are made predominantly of steel and polymers, including all your office furniture, etc. So what it's trying to say is, what the RMV says is, let's concentrate on these, because we want to create downstream jobs. And the biggest job generator in the world, we know, is manufacturing. So then on the upstream, if we look at the SADC, we can see of all the projects that were announced in 2015 go ahead, they're over 300, worth over $100 billion. That's an enormous market. And in fact, the SADC market for mining inputs is bigger than Europe. So while we struggle to compete in making fridges or tumble dryers or pop-up toasters or whatever, where our market is like 1-2% in Europe, mining is very different. Our market is bigger than Europe. South Africa alone is bigger than Europe. That's ex-coal mining, and including the region, that doubles up. So we are an enormous market. And this is a kind of an exception where resource-based development makes sense, because within that resource, you suddenly have scale economies. Other example would be like West Africa is over 60% of the world's cocoa. Therefore, it is over 60% of all the inputs. Therefore, it has a comparative advantage in a very large market, yet all those inputs are still imported from the first world countries. Here we can see the breakdown of the SADC mining projects. You see about half South Africa, half the other SADC countries. Here's a breakdown of the inputs that we import in. These are exported jobs. 6 billion. For every 1 billion rand, we know from MEMSA, the mining machinery cluster, it's about 2,000 jobs. So if you take 6 billion, how many we losing? You're talking about 1.2 trillion. We're talking over 1 million jobs are being lost, I think, including multipliers. I can do the sums afterwards if you want me to. And you can see that it's about, the imports around about 50-50, SADC ex-South Africa and South Africa. The blue line is SADC without South Africa, slightly more, and the orange line is South Africa's imports. And then we also see that this machinery cascades, as we know, down to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which would be your steel industry and your aftermarket. And each one, the mine set the specs, and the price range for the OEMs, who do the same for the sub-assemblers, the components, the steel and raw materials, and then they all obviously have an aftermarket. If you're doing components, you also do the aftermarket. The main point that we make in here, this is a huge opportunity to be realized. We also see jobs being lost through mechanization, yet CGE, computerizable general equilibrium models, show that it's both in Finland and the study done in South Africa, that if you don't import the machines and you mechanize, it's actually job neutral. So you lose jobs on the face, you create much higher quality jobs in manufacturing, all the new equipment, the ICT that you need, the fleet control, etc., etc. But basically, it is not, mechanization doesn't mean job loss unless you import all of the kit, all of the systems to mechanize. other issue is around regional beneficiation centers, something that has been tried and I've been involved for the last 40 years, such as the Impress refinery in Zimbabwe that took feed from Silibi Pikwe before that died. But why has that regional centers for beneficiation for scale economy been such a failure? If one looks at it, and that is because every country would like to have the plant themselves, because then they get all of the indirect advantages, both direct fiscal and indirect, of having the plant. Therefore, one way that could work is that multi-ownership, which that was tried, where the different countries would own the beneficiation plant, like Rand Refinery was owned by the different companies pro rata to their feed of concentrate to the refinery. That doesn't work because governments want the total fiscal package. So what could work is if the beneficiation plant, say a KTF, potassium tantalum fluoride plant, was set up. The only place would be South Africa because of the fluorine chemistry. Then instead of all the countries producing, owning and getting dividends, we'd need agreement from the South African Treasury that all of the fiscal gains from that plant, meaning the pay-as-you-earn, the corporate tax, the beer they're drinking, the cigarettes they're smoking, etc., the total fiscal take from that activity is divvied up according to the feed and doesn't go to South African Treasury. I believe that's the only way we'll get regional plants to work, is if we're honest about sharing the benefits. Then the big elephant, before I come to the elephant very quickly, is the quickest and easiest method, which some countries in the region have used to encourage beneficiation, is to slap on an export tax, like Zambia had on copper concentrate, and like Indonesia has done. However, that is illegal because the white man, the EU, have made that illegal under the SADC EPA. It's exactly the kind of thing they used to get developed where they are. For instance, Sweden used it, and I know other European countries have used export taxes since the 11th century on grains. They've now kicked away the ladder, a la Hajun Chang. They've kicked away the ladder for poor countries to come up by saying, well, you can't trade with us unless you agree that you will not in any way encumber your exports to us. So that the quickest and easiest instrument is removed by the EU's venality, and that is coming from their raw materials initiative, which actually instructs the EU bureaucrats to use trade negotiations to guarantee free, unencumbered access to raw materials from Africa, which is then realized in their SADC economic partnership agreement. I think it should be called the European Neo-Colonial Agreement. Then the final big elephant in the room that mitigates against all types of down and upstream minerals beneficiation are the illicit financial flows. There's a big debate, but let's remove ourselves from the debate, and both sides, including the Chamber of Mines, agree that it is big. As soon as anyone tries to quantify it, like the Mbeki report commission, everyone gets caught up in the details. So we all know it's massive. We think it's actually bigger than FDI into Africa. That's the illegal money leaving through over-invoicing inputs and under-invoicing outputs. Now, if you're a company, you definitely don't want to beneficiate, because then you get terminal prices. Much better to export an ore or concentrate where there is no transparent final price, and you can under invoice and transfer surplus profit to Zug in Switzerland, and instead of paying 30% corporate tax, you pay 5%, or you go to the Virgin Islands or Bahamas or where all these guys are based, like Glencore and Co. So the same applies on your inputs. You don't want local content. You can double the price of your inputs through a trading company in Switzerland that you can't prove belongs to the mining company, and double all your machinery. All that does is that money goes straight out tax-free. So that's a major disincentive. When you raise it, of course, the mining industry gets hot and bothered, but it's there. It's not in their interest to beneficiate if they are transfer pricing or transfer mispricing. Because if you do beneficiate, it constrains transfer pricing dramatically. You cannot over-invoice inputs if they're all sourced from the country, from the host country. I think that's the only other thing that the RMV has is a series of interventions to manage variable geometry, and that is also called Bambazonki, which where the strongest economy tends to take most of the benefits. So under the Central African Federation, that was Harare or Salisbury, became known as Bambazonki, and that would be Gauteng here, or in Mercosur, it's Brazil, is that the most advanced country always gets the first benefits. To counter, instead of just ignoring industrial polarization or variable geometry, the RMV proposes a series of measures, particularly venture capital funds, to try and level the playing field, and then that we have regional local content recognition that is balanced by the richness of the country, or the inverse of GDP per capita. Using that as a multiplier, it's recognized at that level, meaning South Africa would be recognized in Zambia at 60% of the value of the item, but Malawi would be recognized in South Africa at 90%. The details are in the presentation, which I'm sure they'll make available. It's now 14:33, and I think I should shut up.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's worrying to watch history continuously repeat itself, but thank you so much.
When you get to my age, you've seen it many times. It's like deja vu.
Yeah, it's only the second time around for me, so I'm not emotionally prepared. But yeah, thank you so much. Elisee, are you able to turn on your video? There we go. You still need to unmute yourself, and if we can, Paul, if you can stop your screen share, we can start with the other presentation. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've shared my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet. Let's see.
No.
No. Do you want me to share it for you? Ah, there we go.
Okay.
It's just have to go, yeah. At the bottom of your screen.
You can see it. I can't. Okay.
Just go to the bottom of your screen. There's the PowerPoint logo. And if you click on that, then we'll be able to see the PowerPoint as well. There we go. And if you can just click from beginning, so that we can make it full screen.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sorry, guys, for the technical error earlier on. Yes, I'm Byelongo Elisee, Isheloke Postdoctoral Research Fellow at the University of Cape Town. I'm privileged to have been led by Professor Haro von Blotnitz, and I would like to salute his leadership and guidance throughout this project. Just to tell you the outline of this presentation, I'm going to tell you the aim and objective of this study. I will tell you the information pertaining to methodological aspects that were dealt with and the technicalities that we looked at. We'll tell you how data was garnered, and we'll discuss the findings before concluding. Now, the objective of this study is threefold. Firstly, to comprehend why is it difficult to put together a sound beneficiation policy for the SADC region and to implement that policy. Secondly, I will examine how the SADC countries' beneficiation policy match the African mining vision. And last but not least, we'll look at what is needed in order to propose a more integrated model for the SADC economic development in line with the African mining vision as spelled out in the African Union Agenda 2063. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of this study. As shown on the map, you can see we've got the SADC region is huge, and the region is endowed with many minerals, and we have opportunities for beneficiation that we need to look at. For example, cross-border opportunities for copper and cobalt on the Zambia and DRC border. We've got beneficiation opportunities for platinum group metals between Zimbabwe and South Africa. We've got beneficiation opportunities for zinc between Southern Namibia and South Africa. Trilateral with distance on heavy mineral sands involving countries like South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Madagascar. This is another opportunity that need to be looked at. And we've got multilateral cooperation opportunities on diamond polishing between Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and the DRC. In no way I'm suggesting that the list is exhaustive. Now, just to tell you a little bit more about the methodology that was followed, we designed the study qualitatively, and we conducted 25 semi-structured interviews, of which many were in-depth interviews. We managed to get on time the ethical clearance, and we conducted a pilot study prior to embarking on the main study. And the pilot study was conducted with experts, and we then, analyzed data using NVivo Pro 12, which helped us to synthesize information, to also to connect, what the interviewees had to say with the literature. We then did the thematic analysis of the output, and the proper content analysis also followed. Now, you would be asking yourself, what were the findings of this study? Now, the major findings from the literature were as follows. We found that mineral beneficiation policies are relatively new within the SADC region. We also found that some SADC countries' beneficiation, some SADC countries' beneficiation policies as a priority or a national policy. This is the case of Botswana, South Africa, and the DRC, to name but a few. We also found that economic literature is critical of mineral beneficiation. We have opponents to the beneficiation policies and practices like Patrick Bond. We also have many proponents of the beneficiation policies, mainly in the government. And last but not least, we found that mining-related industrialization occurs more due to upstream and sidestream linkages than to downstream beneficiation. Now, just to tell you more about the output of this study, we found that there is a mismatch between beneficiation policies in the SADC. South Africa has beneficiation as a national policy. In Botswana, beneficiation is a success story. In Zimbabwe, beneficiation can say through the lenses of intergenerationalization. Lesotho has beneficiation policy decided upon not very long ago, but there is little implementation on the ground. The DRC has beneficiation as a national policy, as a compulsory policy, and yet we see many raw materials going out of the country, mainly via Rwanda. So also participants, spoke about this, when they say, for example, that one participant said, we don't understand the link between government, politics, and economy. Another participant said that the DRC is a very, very big place. Look at it province by province. Investors want to see return on their investment. And government officials, we also found that there is a mismatch between what government officials I mentioned earlier on and industry experts and economists. And also, there is, for example, as participants put it to us, they said it would be better that each mineral is beneficiated in the country where it was extracted. Yes, we also saw there are participants who thought it could be done in the region, and this is not a new idea. As already in 1980s, when they had the development corridors, the idea was that in the region, countries could support each other, even on beneficiation practices. Another participant said that regional beneficiation makes economic sense, keeps value, reduces transport cost. And we, through this study, we identified a number of challenges, such as infrastructure development, scarce skills, electricity, and the cost factor. Actually, participants agree that beneficiation is expensive to undertake. Now, a little bit to tell you more about the output, we found that regional economic integration was a necessary precondition for economic development. A participant was outspoken when he lamented that, you know, how come, he said, we need visa to go to our own mine in Namibia? And another participant said, tax reduction, one would, in the first phase, want to see a common market being created. It's one thing to beneficiate our minerals, it's another thing to find the market in the region. So another participant put it beautifully in this way. He said, SADC can deal with Zimbabwe, but what SADC cannot deal with, the failed South Africa. Other economies are not big enough. If you don't fix this, meaning the economy of South Africa, it's going to be a problem. Now, a question was thrown to the participants, and this is the answer that we got. Is one participant said, reforms that accelerate implementation of policies are needed. Now, to conclude this presentation, let me share what we found, what we arrived at the finish. You know, SADC beneficiary policies align in theory with the African mining vision, but in practice, there are several near misses. Market reality should dictate what beneficiation trajectory the SADC follows, rather than wishful population. Now, for the SADC to have an integrated beneficiation that works for the region, we need to have a conciliatory approach, and there needs to be a strategic alignment and joint planning and development of infrastructure and the human resources within the region. Last but not least, there is a long way to go to integrate beneficiation policies to achieve economic growth. In acknowledgement, I would like to thank the NRF for the postdoctoral research fellowship funding, and Professor Johan Peterson for hosting me at the UCT, and of course, all of you for being such a patient audience, visual audience. I thank you.
Thank you so much. It's I suppose another example of how one cannot necessarily implement policy as easily as we'd hope. We have a few questions from the chat, and again, if anyone is interested in actually taking the floor, just raise your hand, and I'll invite you to ask. So the first question is around green beneficiation, and how do we actually tap into our minerals without using coal, for example? And I think this is directed towards Paul.
Look, you know, the periodic table and science is science. Clearly, the use of coal is where you, in beneficiation, where you have pyrometallurgy, where you smelt. So you separate the metal out by high temperature and you get a metal and a slag, you know, like steel making. Or it's hydrometallurgy, which is chemical, which basically means you leach it, you dissolve it, and then you precipitate it. Broadly, there are lots of different, and that is low energy and could be called green because it doesn't use fossil fuels and produce greenhouse gases. There's a lot of research on methods to lower or avoid pyrometallurgy to try and get the metal out without smelting. And then, of course, there are mines and so on that are using innovative power sources, like in smelters. With the shortages from Eskom, they've all become much more efficient. They never use their off gases. They now do cogeneration, things they've done for a long time in Europe. But because electricity was so cheap in South Africa, because electricity was so cheap in South Africa, they didn't really worry about optimizing it. So that basically it's a price signal. By the cost going up or the availability going down, companies have moved to more efficient, greener methods of beneficiation. However, it's very difficult to make general statements. Tell me which mineral and which element is being extracted, and we can then focus on making it green, like green steel, which uses hydrogen as the reductant instead of coking coal or methane gas. That is a possibility. How does one get the hydrogen? Through obviously reverse hydrogen cells, fuel cells, where you convert water using a fuel cell, using a solar panel to hydrogen and oxygen. And then you use the hydrogen as a reductant to reduce oxides, whether steel or other, producing the metal plus water. However, it's difficult to say how this could be done across the board. You'd have to look at each case and see what the technical feasibility is to become greener.
Thanks, Paul. Elisee, I've got a question for you. Most countries, having been revising their mineral policies in the recent years, how old are the beneficiation policies? And referring back to the regional mining vision, are those countries with beneficiation policies perhaps aligning with the RMV?
Yes, beneficiation for certain minerals has been happening for many years, but in general, beneficiation policies relatively new, as I mentioned it. Like in South Africa, it's only after the world economic crisis in 2008, 2009, that efforts have been deployed to start looking at this issue profoundly, and we now have the beneficiation strategy, which was produced as a result of that. Yes, so yes, it's a it has been there, but not for very long. Yes.
Mm.
Can I correct that? South Africa has had beneficiation policies and debates since the 30s around diamonds and Hockenheimer. There's even an old cartoon from the 40s on how all the diamonds were leaving the country without being beneficiated. And then, of course, one of the last things of the old regime in the early 90s was the infamous, famous 37E, which was a massive boost to beneficiation. It basically gave you immediate tax write-off of capital intensive projects. And we saw a range of projects like ferro alloys, we had Hillside, and then Mozal, but of course that didn't come under. But 37E came to, in today's money, billions of dollars. And that was in the early to mid 90s until it was scrapped, I think, in about 97. And many of the other countries have also had beneficiation. So it's not true to say they're recent. They go way back. I think it's only old fossils like myself are aware, because we've gone through these again and again. Thanks.
Yes, if I can just add to that. Yes, as I said, beneficiation has been happening for many years, but to align with the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, it's only in February 2009 that has happened. In other countries like the DRC, for example, we found that it has been on and off. Sometimes countries will embrace a policy of nationalization, and then we'll decide later that beneficiation should be the national policy, like it has happened in South Africa as well, and the DRC. So it's on and off sometimes. It's very difficult to then say that it has been consistently happening over the years.
Thank you. So I've got a question here for Paul. Can you give an opinion on critical energy minerals, for example, copper for electronic motors, lithium, graphite for batteries as examples?
Look, you have critical energy minerals, which are only one part of your economy. The difference between what was presented earlier, where you just look at all like heavy mineral sands, aren't strategic at all to us. What are heavy mineral sands? They're basically your titanium substitution series, and 95% of them will end up as pigment in paint. And beneficiating those, which is suggested in the other presentation, the market is already supplied. Now it would just be beneficiating for the sake of beneficiating before export. What we need to look at, and I try to explain, and the regional mining vision, is strategic minerals. What are the minerals we need to beneficiate for our economies to take off, that every developmental state had to put in place? Like South Korea had no minerals, but they still put in a steel industry, because you can't have manufacturing without steel. They also put in petrochems, because you can't have manufacturing without polymers. So Taiwan did the same. In fact, it was owned by the KMT, the Kuomintang. And it was put in not to make money. It was put in to underpin the manufacturing. Very low rates of return. The same with POSCO in Korea. The same with Bao Steel and Hebei in China. They are put in to underpin manufacturing, not really to make profit. So when you come to the energy minerals, obviously the whole economy needs energy. And then with the change now, with the wall of global warming that we're hitting, there are new minerals that are around other forms of energy. So the old ones are the fossil fuels, which are killing the earth, basically hydrocarbon and carbon, producing loads of carbon dioxide and insulating the earth, very much the same as the Great Death 250 million years ago, the PT between the Permian and Triassic, when 75% of all species on land died and over 90% in the sea. The same happened. We are heading the same way, and to get out of that, we now need new minerals. So all of your renewables are intermittent. You don't get them when you want them. So it is really problematic. You need to store. And therefore, for storage, lithium has come in. And of course, in a lithium battery, lithium-ion battery, the separator is cobalt because of its molecular geometry. And it actually uses more cobalt than lithium. So we're in a strong position. Over 50% of the world's reserves of cobalt are in Southern Africa. Lithium not. Lithium is mainly in brines, in the subduction zones in South America, where the Pacific plate is being subducted under South America. and you get lots of brines in Chile, up into Peru, in that belt. Those are the cheapest sources. Then on alternatives also is the fuel cell, which requires PGMs for the anode and cathode. And then, of course, copper now comes back. Copper lost out to fiber, right, all over the world. Telephone lines, copper, were replaced by fiber. Copper's coming back because an electric car uses obviously 6 times more copper than the old dirty car, the ICE, the internal combustion engine, right? So there are minerals that will come into play, come out of play. The only really important one for us, I think, is cobalt. Our lithium reserves are very limited, mainly in Zimbabwe, lepidolite, in the Bakita complex of pegmatites and arcturus. But we're not a big resource. I think we're less than 5%. The big resources of lithium are elsewhere.
So I've got a few other questions. And we've got a raised hand. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask Henrik?
Thank you, Aysha. Can I first just say sorry for sending out that incorrect invitation, my sincere apology. But coming back to the business of the day, Paul, thank you for your very good presentation. But can I ask, mining companies do maintain that their focus is mining, and beneficiation is basically limited to smelting and those kind of activities. Is the production of terminal, what you call end products, not a function of local manufacturing and trade and international agreements? In other words, the onus lies on manufacturing rather than mining. And how does one facilitate that kind of argument?
Yeah, the mining companies used to do everything upstream and downstream, as we know from Anglo here with AMIC. They had the biggest explosive factory in the world, which was AECI. And then with the Washington, with the mantra of the free market, they all went stupid and suddenly said core competence, right? We don't know how to do it anymore, as if they'd been on a lead mine and gone dumb. Meanwhile, they'd been doing it because they had to. On the Copper Belt, when they invaded, went in with Cecil John and his mercenaries, there was no infrastructure. So all along the Copper Belt, the mining companies put in schools, they put in inputs, there were foundries, because they had to, because the cost of bringing something from the colonizers, Britain or Europe, was so expensive. So they set it up. Then suddenly, recently, they've come with core competence. But look, nothing to do with core competence. They're just talking twaddle. It's about return on capital. They're just looking for profit. And if you go downstream into manufacturing, your returns are very much like anyone making widgets anywhere. But in mining, you have resource rent, so you can make exceptional returns. So all they're saying really is, why should I move down into low returns? This was the conundrum of manganese in South Africa. We had 80% of the world's high-grade resources and the cheapest electricity in the world in the 90s, and yet we didn't beneficiate into ferromanganese. Why? Doesn't make any sense. The reason was ferromanganese, you're competing with everyone who's importing ore and smelting, but on the ore, you have monopoly rents or resource rents. So they were making fantastic returns, nearly 100% return on capital on mining. And even though they could make a really nice return on smelting, over 20%, they weren't interested. The real reason they come with this rubbish about core competence is they gain core resource rents, core high return on capital is what they're after. The terminal, when I refer to terminal prices, not products, terminal prices are like NYMEX, New York commodity, or LME, or Shanghai, is where you have an international price every minute of the day for like copper of a particular grade, or gold or nickel, and therefore it's very difficult to cheat on transfer pricing, because the local IRS, the taxman, can say, well, you produced 50,000 tons and the average price was X, your revenue should have been Y. Simple. But what if you produce iron ore? There's no price for iron ore, because every ore is different. Every iron ore has higher, lower phos. Every iron ore is different in terms of lumpy, sinterfines, fines, etc. It's an ore. It's unique to the deposit. Therefore, you can cheat. So the reference to terminal pricing is that sometimes companies don't even want to go as far as the metal, because then suddenly the taxman is on top of them. A concentrate is anything you like, because what is the concentrate? There's no price for a coltan concentrate. Each bag of concentrate is different. And therefore, that's great for cheating the taxman. I hope that made sense.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. We have a little bit more, well, we don't have any time, we're over time, but I'm thinking just on one last question for both of you. Does the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement have provisions that help overcome some of the challenges you indicated with regards you being Paul, but I think we should hear from both of you in terms of the Free Trade Agreement. Some of the challenges you indicated with regards to the centralized processing in the SADC region. And if we could keep the answers short and sweet.
I already spoke to you about centralized processing. We've been fighting for that, well, I have, since 1980. And in general, it hasn't happened, even though if you step back, it should happen, is because countries aren't stupid. They know that even if they've got a plant that's only half optimal size, they are getting all of the employment, they're getting the multipliers, they're getting the input industry into that beneficiation industry, whatever the inputs are, and they're getting the full tax take from that economic activity, including personal tax, corporate tax, and duties and excise, cigarettes, booze, etc., etc. They're getting everything. Therefore, the economic logic doesn't always work. A country will still want to have a 50% optimum scale plant. That's why we are recommending that if we do that at SADC, then we need the host country, let's say it's Zambia, to agree, their taxman must agree that all the taxes from that activity are shared out to the providers of the feedstock pro rata to the tonnage they provide. I don't know if that makes sense, but the Africa Free Trade Area is a boon, especially in combination with the Afri-Exim Bank. It's no use having free trade if you can't finance that trade. However, the rich world, basically Europe and its offshoots, they are overcoming that by providing very cheap export credit to their companies. So, for instance, Sweden, and the same with America, Sweden will back Volvo for lease agreements. So now the mining company doesn't buy the equipment, the mining, yellow metal, mining machinery, it leases it. Comes to the same thing, as we all know, between a lease and a purchase. But the advantage that the Swedes have is that they use their export credit agency to offer the lease at virtually 0%. The US does the same. The Exim Bank for Caterpillar. And the same is done Komatsu by the Japanese. The best South Africa can do We don't even have the interest makeup anymore coming from Treasury for exports. Is maybe the IDC will get you at 8%. You've blown out the water when competing, even in South Africa. So Bell is losing. Bell makes mining big machines like ADTs. They're losing market share in South Africa because the rich world are able to offer the customer finance at 0%. Then you don't buy, you just lease it, and it comes out a lot cheaper for you. But that's a major problem. Mitigating against the use of the free trade area, because we already had in SADC for many items, the barriers had come down.
Thanks.
However, the world's moving on, and especially for the backward linkages, mining inputs, we're seeing increasing leasing rather than purchasing.
Yeah, no, I can see that as well. I think it's an important issue to consider. Elisee, would you like to step in and give us your opinion here?
I'd like to agree with Paul on what he just said now. Yes, for the African Free Trade Agreement to be effective, we need to engage with countries, and we need to put emphasis should be put on the regional cooperation before we look at the continental opportunities. If we don't get it right in the region, there's no way we can get it right, as a continent. But I'd like to say that it's a good to start. It's a good start. The good step to start. And as I mentioned in the presentation, there are government policies, national policies, government policies that are there, and companies need to find a conciliatory approach to engage with the government to work. I understand that industry and experts sometimes do not like what the policies stipulate, but those are the policies that we have, and there is to be an engagement between public-private engagement to get it right.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to end it there. I just really want to thank both the presenters for their input, and it was a great discussion. There's definitely more to be said on the topic because there's some questions we haven't been able to address, but thank you so much, and tune in next week for a session on artisanal mining in South Africa, and I hope you all enjoyed the forum.
Thanks. You don't need to tune your computer like a radio, so you don't need to tune in, you just need to switch it.
I mean, there's a fair amount of standard responses that I just have to say.
Like the old days, looking for the radio station.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You,
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Will you, you'll circulate that presentation, that SADC R&D one?
Yes, I'll actually send it.
Yeah, I think I was amiss. If the participants had been able to see that, it would have been a lot easier. Okay.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. I'll send it through.
This is Mrs. Hart. What does she want? Hello? Okay, we're just wrapping up.
Hi, David.
Okay, tatenda. Maita basa. Okay. Sarai Zwakanaka.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.